Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend just a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Daniel Smith, the genealogy librarian, and you are listening to the Local Genealogists Speak podcast series. In this episode, we are hearing from a local genealogist about their experiences doing family history research. We are also listening for their tips and suggestions for doing genealogy. As a librarian, I am convinced that we all learn from each other, and we all have valuable information to share. By the way, this episode will be a part of a larger series of interviews with local genealogists, so be on the lookout for others. Today I'm joined by Mac, a local genealogist who has graciously agreed to answer questions about genealogy software, DNA, brick walls, online connections, and more. In honor of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Mac will also share a favorite part of U.S. history. Thank you for joining us, Mac. As we begin, I would love to ask you, why did you start researching your family history?
Well, actually, it's kind of a family effort. When I was a young kid, we used to go visit our great aunts down in Columbus, Ohio. So we got to know some older people from the Wing family. That's my paternal grandmother's surname. She came from a large family down in Columbus, and one of the early memories I have related to family history is of a family portrait that was taken around 1908, we believe, by a professional photographer, and everyone was supposed to be in a relaxed pose and all that kind of thing, but it looked very posed. So anyway, there were some faces behind some of the names with that photograph. And after the Aunt Mary died, my dad and oldest brother had the pleasure of cleaning out her house, and they saved a lot of family archival treasures, one of those being that photograph. So I got to know a little bit about the Wing family from that. Actually, that's probably the most well-known part of my family is the Wing family line. They came over in the mid-1600s from England,
Wow.
driven, of course, like many, by religious persecution, and they settled in Sandwich, Massachusetts. And around 1660, one of the sons built what they call a fort house in East Sandwich, what's East Sandwich now. And that Wing fort house still exists.
Wow.
It's open to the public, $15. I'm not sure what the cost is. I think it's on a voluntary basis. So anyway, that was one of the first steps. Another step, my uncle, who's my mother's brother, her and her brother went back to their original hometown near Watertown, New York, in the mid-1970s. My uncle was born in a stone house outside of Watertown, New York, built around 1815. And over the years, people built extensions onto this stone house, and my uncle was rummaging through the attic of one of our relatives and found an old photograph of this stone house when it was a hotel. And he was so taken by it, he took the photograph and had a woodcut commissioned.
Wow.
And copies were made of that woodcut, and each of us received an enlarged version of it, and it hangs proudly in all of our living rooms. So those two things were the major landmarks of first interest in family. And then after my mother died in the late 80s, her house was then cleaned out, and my two brothers inherited most of photos and documents, and there was a lot more than any of us ever knew about. And during the 90s, one brother went through and organized all that in about 150 binders. And he ended up really getting involved in this where he's writing stories about some of these relatives, and he was interviewing living relatives that he could find and getting more details. So we're getting more and more details of family that we just had no idea existed. So when the internet came into being and computers and so on, and I started getting involved in Ancestry, and I was just blown away by how easy it now was to find many of these relatives and start getting details about them. So I started putting together a tree and take it away from there.
I love how it seems like there's a lot of instances in your family history where it revolves around an attic or someone storing things, and you're able to find it, including photos and things that kind of give you extra information. So it's amazing that you have that gift, and that, sometimes it's tempting to just chuck all that and not take time to go through it. So I'm glad that you took time to mine those and see what you could find. So earlier you talked a little bit about technology and beginning to dabble in that and how that's been helpful for you in your genealogy, particularly as around the 90s when some of these things started developing. I'd be really curious to hear about what genealogy software you would recommend to folks and why.
Well, there's kind of like three areas of software that are relevant. One is where your tree is. One is where you're getting a lot of your research information. And the other is whether you want to get into DNA. I'm interested in all three. I'm also interested in simplicity. And I started out using a software called TNG. And it's a beautiful program, and it's not the easiest one to use. You have to know a little bit about HTML. You have to get a web host to host your site. But once you get that all set up, then you're ready to get started and build a tree on it, and it had some very nice features. But you still had to basically put in all the documentation, sources and records by hand, because it wasn't tied to other libraries of that information. So after a couple of years of working with that, and I said, I'm giving up. I'm going to take the easy route here. I'm going with Ancestry. Whatever people say about it, to me it's just the best place to have your tree, to be able to easily source records, and the last 10 years or so to incorporate your DNA matches and identify them in your tree.
I love that. Yeah, I like that you kind of took us through a journey through software, and I think that is probably a true story for a lot of folks, and so I appreciate you sharing your journey with software and technology with us.
And I should add, you want to back it up to your Ancestry tree. You want to back that up to Family Tree Maker, or the other one is Roots Web, I believe, that's also compatible with Ancestry.
Yep, yeah, that's a very good suggestion. So when you were talking about software, you briefly hinted some stuff about DNA and the way you've used DNA. So I'd love to hear about how DNA has helped you break through some brick walls.
Well, it's identified some relatives of mine that we never knew existed. When I first was looking at my DNA matches, I'm seeing these relatively close relatives who I had no idea who they were. So I was able to figure out who our common ancestors were going back to like third great-grandparents. But to this day, I have still not been able to figure out exactly their line of descent from those great-grandparents.
Wow.
Now, my main brick wall in my direct line is my great-great-grandmother, Emmeline Smith. And you may know the challenges of researching Smiths. Now, I've identified about 50 or so matches that tie in to, I believe, they lead back to two of her brothers. And their mother was an Elizabeth Smith, and I haven't been able to pin down who Elizabeth Smith was married to other than a Smith. So I'm still working on that, and I'm just letting it go for now. Yeah, we'll figure it out eventually. I'm hoping that the DNA matches point back resoundingly to specific set of people that I can then say are her parents.
Yeah, I think that's always the hope. And I think, as we know, more and more people are continuing to test with DNA. And so I think that, it's always you never know when you might get a new match. I'm always surprised when I get a notification saying, you've matched with somebody else. A lot of times it's someone who's a fifth or fourth or seventh cousin or something like that. But occasionally, like recently, I matched with somebody who was a second cousin once removed, which was really good for me. Like I was able to then actually make some pieces and piece things together.
Right.
So it sounds like, DNA has helped you break through some walls. So I'd love to hear about those distant connections that you've made with family members online and how it's helped you advance your research.
I've made some amazing connections with people online as well as my brother. We've gotten letters written in the middle 1800s that describe life in those days and who was doing what. And so we go through those letters, and when you have the structure of a tree along with it, you can start to really piece together what their lives were like and what they were thinking at that point in time. I've gotten some amazing photographs from some relatives. Now, these are not people that I knew before internet came into being, but through various ways you identify people, you get in touch with them. However, maybe they're on a website because they're a professor at a college somewhere, so you use their college email and apologize before you get into your questions. But however it's done, once you get a live wire, and I've maybe half a dozen or so that just had an amazing store of photographs. So I pretty much have photographs of everyone through my great-grandparents. So by all means, anyone should try to contact as many. And eventually you'll find the ones who are immersed in this and enjoy it as a hobby and have something to offer.
Absolutely, yeah. I found that true, too. And the same thing is for DNA, like being able to reach out to somebody with Y-DNA, as you mentioned, being a Smith, it's sometimes very difficult to trace certain things. But when you match with someone on a Y-DNA, you know that you've got some shared Smith heritage there. And it's been fun collaborating with someone who I don't really know, who's a distant cousin, but we've been able to start trading some of our research and hopefully making some progress and some thoughts on
Smiths are my mother's side, so...
It doesn't help you. I'm sorry.
Nope.
So, and now, in honor of the America 250 celebration, it's time to ask you about your favorite part of U.S. history.
The one that I'm most interested in is World War II, and for a variety of reasons, obviously my parents lived through it, although my father was working in a steel plant during the war, so he was not drafted. And my mother, of course, she was planting victory gardens. My uncle was drafted, and he was sent to at the fort in Salt Lake City. He met his wife there, settled down right nearby in Ogden, Utah, and never looked back to his upbringing in Ohio. So it changed so many lives. It's just an amazing part of history that affected the world in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think that it impacted a lot of folks, as we know, but I think a lot of us knew people who were somehow involved in that. Even for folks of multiple generations, I think World War II is still a memory, even if it's of your grandparents or your parents or maybe even your great-grandparents, But it's a time when we probably knew someone who's lived through the time and who was impacted by it. So thank you for sharing those stories, but also how that has meaning for you. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us today, Mac. We hope that you all who are listening enjoyed hearing from Mac and learning from him. Hopefully you are also inspired by something he shared or said. Maybe he even gave you an idea to help further your research. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with those who you think would also be interested. One of the best things you can do to support us is to take a moment to comment or leave a rating for this podcast. Those comments and ratings help get this podcast noticed. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.